I call on Clare Adamson to be followed by Michael McMahon.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The convener of our committee talked about the valuable contribution and informing the public about this debate that was the aim of the committee in undertaking our deliberations, and I think the report stands as a good example of informing the public. I also would like to thank the many organisations across Scotland who are conducting similar exercises. In particular, I would like to thank the Royal Society of Edinburgh for providing their briefing for today's debate based on their series of public discussion events enlightening the constitutional debate. And, Presiding Officer, can I also associate myself with comments from the convener in thanking Dan Keneally, the committee adviser, those who appeared as witnesses and provided written evidence to the committee, and also the clerking team for their excellent work. Before I turn to the report, I would like to address some of the contributions to this afternoon's debate. Mr Rennie intervened in the Cabinet Secretary wanting to know about the terms of what Scotland's relationship would be in independent Scotland with the EU. But perhaps he can enlighten us as to the terms of the renegotiated relationship that the EU and his coalition leader, Mr Cameron, is undertaking at the moment, because the truth is there is no status quo, a no vote, and that this is a choice for an independent Scotland with Europe or a renegotiated relationship of which there is no certainty and no detail on, followed by a referendum that, given UKIP's success in winning the European elections last week in England, will see Scotland ripped away from Europe against our will. I would also like to comment on Mr McGregor's contribution. I was very disappointed. I did not share his recollections of how the conduct of the committee happened, and I was as a very experienced member, I was very concerned to say that there was lack of transparency, as he knows that all of the amendments that were voted on in the report appear in the appendix, and it's evident to everyone to see what changes were made during the committee's deliberations, and I think this is extremely transparent to people. But what I was most surprised about was the key evidence that Mr McGregor picked up on were Mr Barroso's comments. Can I remind him that on page 27 of the report, in paragraph 96, where it includes Mr Barroso's contribution on the Andrew Marshall, that the footnote at the bottom of that page will show that Mr McGregor didn't want that included in the final report. And you understand, Presiding Officer, I raise that purely in the interests of transparency. I also find it somewhat bizarre that Mr Rowley, at the end of his contribution, welcomed the report, despite the fact he dissented from it. And also, Mr Finlay, in his contribution, was painting a picture of a very suspicious European Union going forward, one that would view Scotland somewhat unfavourably. And I've mentioned the Enlightening the Constitutional Debate, which is a series of discussions held by the Royal Society of Edinburgh. And during their process, Professor Neil Walker of Edinburgh University was asked about how this would be viewed specifically, and other separatist nations, and how it might be viewed within the EU. And Professor Walker responded in two respects. First, and I quote, "The first was that these states must be required to act in the context of public reason. They must give good public reason against Scotland's accession to the EU, which makes sense as part of the history of the European Union." He felt that states would struggle to make the case. And in the second point, he said, "If Scotland did secede from the UK, it would not be contra to the constitutional process. Rather, it would be consensual, as distinct from other national minorities seeking independence. Scottish independence, should it be realised, would have constitutional legitimacy." Now, that's not assertion. That's not the words of an SNP minister. Those are the words of Neil Walker, the Regius Professor of Public Law and the Law of Nature and Nations at Edinburgh University. We didn't expect to... Certainly.
Finlay.
Is the member aware of the comments today by the Swedish Foreign Minister, who has expressed his concern about the balkanisation of Britain? His words, not mine.
Mr Adamson.
I think those comments were very unwise, and I think to use balkanisation as a comparison to Scotland is simply illegitimate, and it's very unfortunate that the member seems to think that that's an appropriate comparison to Scotland's situation in this chamber today. Our report was conducted under 3 themes. And the first theme was the independent Scotland of the European Union. Theme 2 was the road to that membership. And theme 3 was about small states in the European Union. We haven't had time to cover most of those this afternoon, but I would say that the Edinburgh Agreement is absolutely key to what happens going forward. It has been key to the legitimisation of this process, and it stands us in good stead, as this will give us, as Professor Neil Walker has said, that constitutional legitimacy. I think the members on the other side forget that the European Union is about expansion, it's about inclusion, it's about building relationships, it's not about putting up barriers to Scotland's membership on independence.
Thank you very much.